Hi data lovers, my name is Angie and this is Insight Bites with Dexibit. Today we're talking about visitor experience as an integral part of managing visitors to get happy and engaged visitors with great outcomes, particularly when it comes to knowing more about what they do when they come through the door. Because traditionally, visitor attractions have had very few options to get a look at what visitors actually do when they come on site, other than casual observation. But now, in the age of the Internet of Things, there's the opportunity to instrument our venues with sensors that can track where visitors go, how long they spend there, and how they navigate through our site. So there's a few options here, depending on what you want to achieve. The first, most basic option is to begin with footfall data, which is simply a measure of how many people are passing through an entrance. Now that could be an entrance to your venue as a whole, or it could be the entrance to a particular space within a venue. It's useful even if you count visitation from your ticketing, or you can put them into spaces like your gallery or your shop. There's lots of different technologies out there that you can use for this, like cameras or even something really simple like a beam break. And ideally, you'll want these devices connected to the internet so they can report that data back live and with data granularity that's down to the minute, not every 15 minutes, and that they've got something called an API or a backdoor that can be integrated for analytics, like Dexibit. Some of the common vendors that we see here are companies like Sensors, ShopperTrack, Bellwether, Bionic, Intelligent Counters, Telefy, Trafsys. There's a lot out there. Cisco have even put out a product too for those already on Meraki for their Wi-Fi. And you'll want to involve a cross-functional team in a project to roll these devices out, because if you want them to be installed in specific spaces, you'll need them at particular heights or angles, and you might have to contend with restrictions on where you can fix hardware and what that looks like visually for your visitors. If you're in an outdoor facility like a park, there's lots of options too in terms of underfoot sensors or under road sensors to measure traffic flow, though you'll have to scale those by the number of people on average in a car. Now, a hot tip, footfall counters are usually pretty accurate, but you do need to test and calibrate them when you install them at first, and then you'll want to integrity check them every so often. Maybe apply a scaling factor if they're slightly off, and just keep an eye on them all the time, just in case something goes awry. There's been several reported cases of venues whose entrance counters have failed quietly, even due to little things like a light bulb blowing next to them and casting a shadow that they weren't calibrated for, and then they undercount visitors. So do keep an eye out on them. These counters are going to be great for visitation counts if that's how you recognize visitors rather than from ticketing or other sources. And they're also wonderful for counting visitation on specific activities within the venue, like how many people are going to an exhibition. And they're also good for looking at conversion, such as how many people ended up in the shop. And that's really important, say, when you're managing for retail performance, because it's not really fair on the retail team if we just compare the conversion from visitors to transactions and revenue, because it doesn't take into account how many people actually made it into the store. So that metric might not be under the full control of the retail team. For example, if we have a big corporate or private hire and maybe the shop was closed at that time, and then we're counting all those attendees as visitors, even though the retail opportunity wasn't the same. We can also use footfall counters for things like capacity management, and we'll want them both on the in point and the out point to that space, or we'll want a bi-directional footfall center that can tell us those in versus out flows on one entrance. So it's especially important to manage in the case of COVID. And they're also great for looking at flow, like through security checkpoints, or even if we're getting into queue wait times. Again, we'll want them on the entrance and the exit to the queue. So there's lots that we can do with footfall counters, even if we go on to use location analytics to supplement this. Because what footfall counters can't tell us is things like visitor pathway trail routes or dwell times, although some advanced cameras can give us an estimate in a small space. So that's when we bring in indoor positioning for a deeper insight into visitor behaviour. There's a few technology options here, and each has got its pros and cons, like RFID, Wi-Fi and BLE, to name a few. Essentially, it's going to be a trade-off between convenience, impact to visitor experience and accuracy, what we need in our network and whether we need to roll out access points or receivers across the site, and then what the visitor needs in terms of a device or an app or nothing, and how accurate the data needs to be, how granular to the visitor's position it needs to be. Our favourite is RFID. It's the cleanest data. All you'll need is a network of RFID receivers and tags that you give to your visitors, like a lanyard, which you can use also for things like ticketing access or even retail payments. Wi-Fi, by comparison, is quite messy data, so it's not particularly accurate or granular. But on the other hand, if you've already got a Wi-Fi network and your visitor is already carrying their phone, and maybe a good percentage are even already connected to your network, it's really convenient and you can get a really good sample size of your visitor. How this works is your Wi-Fi network listens from signals from your visitors' own devices that they're carrying, preferably that are already connected to the network, because this gives a cleaner signal, and then it tracks those signals across the course of your site. Do watch out though that your Wi-Fi network is in fact analytics capable. You'll need a vendor like Cisco CMX, Meraki, HP Aruba, Ruckus or Fortinet, and you'll also need the right license. Many of these vendors unfortunately charge extra for access to integrate to that data. And it is messy data because these signals can be intermittent, they differ a lot between devices, and some are subject to randomization too. So it needs a lot of cleaning and preparation. And the third technology option I mentioned before is BLE, which is Bluetooth Low Energy. To do this, you'll need to roll out these little beacons across your site. You'll need a mobile app with BLE in it, and you'll need to encourage your visitors to download the app and turn on Bluetooth and then make sure everything's calibrated. And then you'll need to maintain the app as a useful part of your visitor experience, aside from just the data. So it's not particularly convenient for data's sake. And on top of that, we've got quite a small sample size for apps, likely under 5% of our visitors. So unless we're doing an app for the app's sake, it's not a great option for Insight alone. Out of all of these options, RFID can be used for a specific visitation counts due to its accuracy and how comprehensive its coverage is, but Wi-Fi and BLE can't be used for counting visitors because they only represent a sample of people who've got a device or got the app, and you're dealing with lower integrity data. With all of these from an insights perspective, you probably will find you'll just want to place people in a space or a room rather than, say, in front of a specific painting, or if you've got an app or digital experience which is also depending on this technology, maybe you might want something a little more granular. And do keep in mind that no matter which one you choose, the data will need to be cleaned up, it'll need to be treated and transformed. Location analytics is truly big data, so you won't want to be trudging around in the depths of it. You're wanting to deal with, say, the most common trail paths or the average dwell time and its distribution, and don't spend too much time agonizing over edge cases. And especially if we're dealing with Wi-Fi, it should also be de-identified and always presented in a summary fashion. We're trying to get insights on general visitor behavior here, not stalking individuals. With RFID though, it might not necessarily be the case if you're using it as part of a more personalized digital experience. So that sounds like a lot, but from the data that we get from these location technologies, it's a dream. For the first time, we can see where people are going and how long they're spending in each space and what their experience is in the venue overall. It's such unique insight that really opens our minds to visitor experience design, especially for things like wayfinding, or if we're managing around construction or planning our latest pop-up retail spot. And it's even got applications for things like operations use, seeing how far into the average visit our visitors come into the cafe, and being able to predict cafe demand for bookings or forecast influx. And we can start to see how these change over time as we introduce improvements, or how they correlate with things like weather or how busy we are. And one last tip here, a visitor experience data set is very comprehensive and deep. These visualizations are beautiful, but they're not something that you glance at and instantly get something. So give yourself some time and some space to sit with them, to digest them, and to interact with them and let that insight come to light. If you and your team would benefit from experience insights to help increase your visitor happiness, then talk to us about Dexibit's forecasts, insights, dashboards, and reports, including for visitor experience. And I'll see you next time for another episode of Insight Bites, or check out Dexibit.com for more on visitor management and big data analytics for places people love.